question about the change order for Mr. Chin.
Okay.
About the what?
The change of the additional charge to Mr. Chin or Chan. Which one is it?
Which one is it?
Which one? How do I pronounce his name?
Chan.
Chan. My understanding
Chan.
is.
I'm
Chan,
sorry.
thank you. I'm sorry.
Appreciate that. I did not realize that until I just picked up what you mean.
Thank you. I didn't realize you were there. Yes. This was an addition.
Yes.
Okay. Then when we first just had the company come in and they evaluated, and they were supposed to evaluate for what the project was going to discover the project, what was involved, and they were looking for asbestos. Correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Then if they missed this on the first round, I think it's on them and shouldn't be added to the lien.
The first round was done by E. Luke Green, so not this company. We contacted them to redo the assessment. They refused based on the conditions.
Mr. Green?
So then we were in a situation where we had TDEC asking the questions. We had the site and partially demolished, and we needed to address the situation. So Alloy did have the state qualified folks to do it. We needed to go on with the project, and that's the reason we did what we did.
Would it not default back to the first person who was supposed to have done the entire project?
Well, I think there may be some grounds for action that we've not talked with the city attorney. That's they refused to come and reevaluate their initial assessment.
Then should we wait on this today until we, have an answer of where we're going to go instead of putting it toward the lien?
Andrew, I'll defer to you.
I don't think so. I think it needs to go forward. That in the end, whether the original evaluator would have found the asbestos or not, ultimately it had to be abated, and that resulted in this additional cost. How it went about that this additional asbestos was found, I guess, is just kind of the reason that it's coming in this second, in this addition, I guess, of $5,000.
This is not my place to speak up, but can I have some input?
No.
No.
Because
No. How much money are we talking about? We're talking about $5,000. Are you saying don't pay it, or what?
I'm saying I don't think it is justifiable to charge it to the property owner because the company that was hired was supposed to do the entire scope of the work, and if something was missed, as Tony said, they didn't find it, then that goes back on who we hired to do the work and put faith in to do a thorough job.
I understand that part, but what you're saying is we pay it, we don't include it in the amount of the lien that's put on it. So we should still go ahead and pay it today.
But I think the way it's worded, it goes toward the lien.
The cost of demolition will be assessed to the property.
Anybody else feel the same way?
Are you saying that the first company that gave the first estimate did not do the work?
They did some work that on the site. It was pointed out there might be something else to TDEC who asked us to reevaluate. That's why we went out and got a second opinion.
no, that is completely. Please arrest me again, because I would like.
This is not.
Prefer you guys arrest me
This is
for
a work
5,000.
session, Louis. This is a work session.
I would like to have some
I
input
know
and
you would, but
save
this is
some
not-
time for everyone.
Do you need to leave or what?
I shut up.
Thank you.
Thank
Go
you.
ahead. Go.
So then they came back after the second assessment, and the people said,
They found some additional floor time.
and the first people did not.
The first people would not come back for the second assessment, so we got Alloy. The people that had a contract for the demolition had a person on staff that was qualified to do it. They did it, and then we paid them to both evaluate and to remediate.
It was obvious, the demolition was obviously stopped for the right reason. Additional asbestos was discovered. The asbestos was removed that was not discovered the first time, but it was not the property owner's fault. It falls back on those of us who approved the first company to go out, assess, and do the demolition.
Is there any way that we can pay the less than $5,000 and hold that with our attorney to see whether or not that needs to be added to it?
I don't think you have a quarrel with the alloy who did the demolition and the second assessment.
It's
They
the
did what
first
you asked them to. It's the first people. They have already been paid for their first assessment. There may be an action to go back to them for this additional cost.
Right.
But paying these people won't change that status. I'm speaking legal opinion.
Yeah, and if you all want to give me the copy of the agreement, I'm sure I've reviewed it back before, but the copy of the agreement that we had with the first company, to see, you know, what those specific terms
Are you
are.
satisfied with that?
Well, what we've got to realize is that we're talking about asbestos here. And the asbestos has to be removed, even if the first company missed half of it. It still had to be removed. So that's a cost to the landowner. But I don't see a problem in paying, is holding that $5,000 that we paid, go ahead and pay it, but not hold it against the landowner until the attorney finds that that's the proper way to do it.
Yeah, attorney advises us on who has the responsibility.
Exactly.
Okay, are you all right with that, Kathy?
Tell me which number it is, Tony.
For the legal opinion.
9C3.
Legal opinion.
Okay, it's 9C3.
Thank you. Okay. So how should how should that be worded then? How should the caption for the motion be worded in order to do what Mr. Petticoat's saying over here?
I would have to leave that up to
That's,
Mark.
I'm asking.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
asking.
Yeah, I think you would somebody make a motion to approve the payment, but then,
Well, there's nothing on here that says
Right, how
anything
it's-
about a lien anyway.
I think it was in some kind of notes there.
Well, it's not on our agenda.
Okay, if it's not in the caption, then,
No.
then what we're going to do is to pay $5,000 to the alley group, and that's coming out of the city, correct? The city's gonna pay that?
Everything today has come out of the city.
Okay.
All right, anything else?
The heating and air unit for Parks and Rec, the unit that would replace the original unit was not available. We did find one that would work. It's a slight upgrade for an additional $700 cost. That's the reason that's on there. Buying equipment and materials is extremely difficult these days, and we'd like to go ahead and get this one before it gets wet.
We're meeting as the beer board also. Those are all, well, two of them are special occasion permits. One is an off-premise permit.
No problem.
Okay, let's not get a nap this afternoon or what? Okay.
Did all of them pay in lieu of money?
I don't know, I guess the cashier or the police chief would know that answer. They have what, 10 days?
Should have been paid not 10 days after the last meeting, Tony, is that the way you understood it?
I'm sorry, I'm distracted, not paying attention. Yeah, that's
I was
right.
taking his name.
The in lieu of, on the fines or
Oh, I have a problem. I would assume that I would have heard if anyone were accused. but I-
anyone had not?
Yeah.
Okay.
Tony, you had a couple of things you want to address the council?
Yes, I appreciate that. First, if you've noticed hanging around on most of the walls in the building and the elevator, we are heading into open enrollment for health insurance. Employees are going to need to come in and do that. That includes you. If you have any changes in your coverage that you want to make, you'll need to schedule an appointment with the Mark III folks and make those changes. If you have the flexible spending account as an option, you must come in and make an appointment. You must once again, re-up that every year. You have to sign the paperwork to do that. So if you want to make an appointment, let us know, let Cindy know, we'll get you set up with Mark III. If you have questions or concerns, we'll get that scheduled for you. The other thing related to that is the annual health risk assessment that we do that goes through and makes sure that you're getting your annual physical and staying on top of things you need to. It is also due in May, and you will recall that if you fail to get the HRA accomplished, that you get a different premium rate. So it's worthwhile, if you've not gotten it done yet, to get an appointment with the clinic and get in, or if you want to do it with your private physician, there are forms available for that. But those things do need to be taken care of, and the month of May will slip by very quickly if we let it. So let us know if you need any help with those things. The second thing I want to bring up and talk about a little bit, an issue that we would like to place on the agenda for your consideration next time, is we've gone to the market for a request for qualifications for engineers. We started down this road because we needed an engineering firm to take on the Greenway extension down Cumberland and Buffalo Trail. But as we got into it, it became clear that we would benefit from having a menu of qualified engineers available to us that we could pre-qualify and select them as projects come up. Andrew and Larry have been working on this. Bob, it'd be sort of like pre-qualifying a contractor on a water line. So you can go through and confirm that they're capable of doing the job, and then when the job comes up, you would work on
what you do not have to do and not supposed to do is bid it.
Right.
You don't buy it. You don't choose them based on the price. You choose them based on whether you think they know what the hell they're doing or not.
But Andrew, Larry, we got 7 responses to our request, and they came in pretty tight. They all were qualified, at least 3 of which we're doing business with now. So what we would like to do, it's a little different, but it will save us some time with every project having to go out and do the RFQ process. If we select them all as qualified and have them ready to go. One of the things we're finding that is very difficult is the availability of staff resources in the engineering firms. Everybody's covered up. So we might want to be able to choose a firm based on their ability to actually take on the job as much as their qualifications. But guys, you all have gone through and looked at them. Any concerns about any of the proposals?
No, and tag on to what Tony said, it's essentially like where TDOT has a list of pre-qualified consultants, and for a lot of their projects, you can just go to their list and select a firm off of that list. So that got us staff looking at that we could do the same thing. Again, as Mr. Cox mentioned, these firms that submitted were real close in range, and everyone, each firm has their niche that they're really good at, but for the most part, they all can do basically anything that the city would need of them to do. So we just thought that it'd be good to follow the TDOT's lead, if you will, and have that list of pre-qualified consultants. That way it would speed up the process, save approximately 2 months of time. And for these projects that we continue to, begin at, start as we go down the road. So we just want to bring that idea before council, get your thoughts if it's something that y'all would like to consider on the next meeting. So,
Tony, what I think is good about that proposal there is the more you have to look at, the better you can not have one to take you for granted. Plus, some of them are not very as good as others, and that gives you an opportunity to pick and choose and not be stuck with one. Because you really don't know how good they are till they do your work, but since you have that, that's an excellent idea.
Yeah, really, these guys came up with it, and I think it will save us time and help us get good work. But we didn't want to just throw it on the agenda and try and explain it out there in an open meeting. So I wanted to get get you up to speed and get your feedback if you have any concerns.
The list is 5,
7.
7,
7.
3 of whom we're using now.
We are, yes, we are already
These are-
using those. And I'm sure there may be a firm or so that's out there, or new firms that come online, that ever so often we can redo that proposal again, and that way any new firms, as long as, that we feel like they meet qualifications, we can add them to that list. So, it's not a one and done deal that, we will never look at another firm to add to the list. But that would give us a good start, and as projects, for selection for projects as we move forward. So,
If you're real lucky, you'll find a good one.
yes.
Well, part of our problem is that there's so much churn within the firms. The individuals you've been working with are no longer with that firm.
The
They're
problem
somewhere
with
else.
those engineers now, they have 90% regulations, 10% engineering. That's a little bit of exaggeration, but not much. You know about that.
Yeah, it's getting harder and harder to get things done. But we think this will serve us well, and if y'all are comfortable, we put it on the next agenda to approve the pre-qualified list.
There's no downside to it.
No, and just to state this, that any future projects that we would, begin and select someone off of that list, of course, any contract would come before council for approval before any work would begin. So you still have approval authority of the contract. So just like you do now. So
Don't try that with the real estate people.
okay.
But, now the way it works is if you're bidding, or not bidding, but getting proposals from firms for a project, you rank them according to qualifications. Council selects the top qualified firm. We go back and negotiate the contract and come back with the contract. This just allows us to set that list of qualified folks up front, cutting out that advertising and review process for the same firms that probably would propose. We do have a few names that we've not worked with that do look promising, and getting some new blood's not a bad thing.
Okay. That's on the next agenda.
That would be on the next agenda.
The comment was about the lien was in your update.
Yes. I think you've gotten notice, but we're planning on doing the proposed budget presentation Friday the 13th. That's not an omen, that's just how we put things fell. 9 o'clock in Public Works. So those things typically have run a couple of hours. At this point, I have about a minute and a half of the presentation put together, so it's welcome, and we'll get things going, but it will be a pretty meaty discussion about the proposed plan for next year, so we're looking forward to presenting it and see what you think about it.
The only first reading item we got is ordinance 4711. That's the one that we're creating, that new commission.
Right.
And we talked about that at the last work session or the one before, but how many names or how many appointments? They're all going to be council appointments, right?
5?
5? Okay. We need some, be thinking of some names. I guess are we going to have staggered terms, or are they all going?
No, we need to stagger them, so
So-
have some continuity.
Staggered 3-year terms, so we're going to appoint a 1 and a 2 and a 3.
Yeah, I think that'll be good.
Yeah, the question is how many 1s, how many 2s, and how many 3s, so up out to 5.
Yeah,
Or you want to replace 1 every 5, 1 each year for 5 years. I don't know how you want to do it.
remember, there's really 2 things going on. We're taking the building appeals board and adding the neglected structures to that, and then creating a new board, entirely new for property maintenance appeals. So we all had to workshop and discuss that. But, Steve can fill you in if there's any other concerns or questions. But again, it gives you another opportunity for someone that feels like they have a problem, to have another avenue to explore that without having to file in court. I think it's a good service and will allow us to serve the community and get things done.
Would that person be allowed to appeal it to the council?
The flow of the appeal would be from the initial hearing to the appeal board, and I think from the appeal board to the courts.
City court, yes.
So is that's not, it just goes straight from the citation to court now?
Yes.
City,
That's correct.
city court.
City court.
That's what city
Property
court.
maintenance.
So council is not involved in?
No, if you need to mow your grass, we don't bring the council.
Well, speaking of that, we've got a lot of people who need to mow the grass.
There's a couple in my neighborhood, I wonder what's going on.
Yes. I think there's some areas that looks like the houses have been abandoned. And I'm talking about some really nice houses.
Came by one this morning, I wondered what the story was, so.
Yeah, you can bale some hay.
Yeah.
Is that the codes guy?
Yeah, right now, we lost one, we're about to put another one on board.
Monday.
Monday, we can get the second one back, we'll be back to full staff, but that would be the code. And they were doing districts, one of them was going east and one of them was going west for a while, I don't know which we're trying to do now.
Well, right now he's doing everything, and until they get the new men on board and up to speed, that's the way it'll continue. And then the idea is they split the city in half, like a Cumberland, and then they rotate every 6 months so that you get a fresh set of eyes on the properties.
Yeah, I'm like you, I drove by 2 homes today, I looked at what's going on here, and they were,
One was probably on your way home. That's the one I'm referring to.
yeah.
Something's going on.
There was a house on Hyder over in the Colonies, over off of Radio Center, and Jonathan went over there. He had just 2 days before, they'd evicted, and it had everything in the house had been put out on the curb. And somebody wrote a notice, they mowed the yard, but we do need to look at our codes, and I'm not supposed to do that, because anything that's over 10 feet, he can't tell them to cut it. But if the house has not been maintained, then what was shrubbery now becomes, forest. So there's several places like that. But Hyder's an example of that. The house had been reclaimed, but the homeowner or the property owner did come in and take it away. It took the whole front of the house. And then there's a place over in Algonquin that Chris told me about. And we went over and talked to the lady there. It looks like a jungle, doesn't it, Chris? And she has a daycare next to it.
Trees growing through the deck on the back. Too, at worse. Said the yard hadn't been mowed, the backyard hadn't been touched in 7 years.
And there are trees that have fallen down. We found out from the codes officer that our ordinance doesn't address. You can let a tree fall and it can be overgrown and you're not required to move it. So our ordinance, we need to look at our ordinance and what, and be maybe a little bit more aggressive is not a nice word, but proactive.
And I think that's part of the reason that when we finally get around to citation and ordering it to be fixed and getting a contractor out there, what they're dealing with is a mess. So falling down trees and waist deep grass makes it more difficult to get those things done. That's the reason that it's a little more than the person who's paying to get his yard mowed every week. So that does explain some of that. But yeah, I think we can make that a to-do item on our list and look at the codes and see what others are doing and kind of where we can bring it up to speed.
Sooner than later would be good on that because we're in that growing season.
Yeah, it'll take a while. We'll do our legwork and see, once we get our new code guy on board, we'll get them out in the field, but we'll put that as a list. Part of the problem is that the same people that are going to be doing that are the same ones that are doing the plan reviews and the building inspections and all the other things for the building boom we've got going. That's all happening up in that wing. So we're stretched thin, but we'll put it on and see what we can get done.
Our first public hearing also is the annexation we delayed voting on last time. Be aware that ordinance for that annexation request, because there was a petition filed with X percent, whatever the percentage was of homeowners in the adjacent property, requires 6 votes, okay? And we didn't have 6 votes last time, so are there any questions about that?
We don't know that we didn't have 6 votes, we didn't vote.
We didn't have 6 votes, so we didn't vote. Are there questions about that? Chris, you said you had gotten some feedback from some residents there that had questions. Were those questions answered
I think so.
satisfactorily?
Well, I don't know, I asked Steve if he might speak before they have their public hearing and explain the gentleman's agreement, is the way I understand it. The non-written agreement.
Well, there's nothing in the city code that specifically prohibits non-single-family traffic going through a single-family neighborhood, but as good planning practice, we always recommend against it. And in fact, we have an example from just a few months ago. Bob may recall, it was the Noe Chapel annexation where they wanted to do the 280-unit assisted living development, and they wanted to connect into Lockmere off of Candera. There was a stub there, and we told them they couldn't, and then they revised their plans to come up with a different primary access. So, I mean, the Planning Commission understands the policy. Like I said, it's not written in stone, but it's just good planning practice not to do that.
Well, that was my understanding that apartments you could not. That's not correct.
That's not. Now, if you'd like to see a text
So if
amendment.
whoever builds the apartment says, by gosh, I'm going to do it because I want to, we can't stop that?
Yes, we can try.
We can stop that?
The reason is because that plan, any multiple building development has to come back to the Planning Commission for approval.
Yeah, but the city council has nothing to do with that.
Well, there are 2 city councilors on the Planning Commission that can.
That's not my point. They're planning commission members.
Yes.
They're at the vote that they're making there, they are planning commission members, not city council members. But my point is that even if we have the 2 people who are on that committee, it still doesn't come back to city council. So
No, it doesn't.
when we rezone, that's what we're doing here. But once we rezone it, it's out of our hands. It's gone.
We're actually annexing it, bringing it into
Our
the city.
annexing,
Yes.
I mean,
But the planning commission can stop that from happening. Is that what
Yes.
you're saying? Okay.
Absolutely.
But how legally, if it's not written, you can just say, no, you can't, and what's the justification?
That it's not good planning practice.
Can we get that changed from not good planning practice to an ordinance? Is that feasible to do?
That'd be a quick.
I mean, I'm not saying
Yeah.
that you're gonna do it, but I'm saying
I've
that's
seen it happen, guys. We've seen it happen in the last couple of years. That we have sat here and said, we would, as a council, like to see this happen. And once we change it, it goes to the planning commission and they said, and I don't know who made the decision, but they said, no, we're not, the city council has nothing to do with it.
And it leaves us.
And we made the comment that we would certainly appreciate it if the planning commission would hold them to it. And the planning commission didn't do it.
Well, it was 3 members of a 7-member council that asked for that.
Maybe we need to put 4 members on there.
We only got 2. We got 2 now.
That's what I said, maybe we need to put 4 on.
No, you just have to be careful whenever you annex or you rezone.
Well, we started, when we annexed, we're also zoning at the same time to save a step. Used to, you annexed and then you came back and you rezoned. And so it's 2 things there. out of our, we've moved on to the planning commission, and you're very right. So, could it be
Well,
put in writing?
If we annex it, I wouldn't want apartments going into Britton Acres, opening up an exit through there. I wouldn't want that to happen. And I would voice that strongly on the planning commission. I think Bob would too. And I think the planning commission would follow that. That's not what worries me. What worries me is the developer said, okay, you've made your ruling, now enforce it. Enforcement has no teeth, whether it's the council or the planning commission. And I thought that what we had was R3, you go into the main, you exit on AJ Highway.
Right. We met with the developer when this process first started, and we talked about, they would be required, since it was over 100 units, they'd be required 2 entrances. And we told them both entrances would have to be on West AJ. Now, the property that they're looking to annex has 1,400 feet of frontage. So putting 2 connections to West AJ is not going to be an issue. And the road already has 25,000 trips per day on it, so it won't impact the volume on it. That's kind of where you want to put it. We made it clear to them at that time we could not support interconnection, and they were fine with it.
Could they have changed it if they wanted to?
Like I said, you have that opportunity. You can take the planning commission, and we would have recommended against it. The one thing when we talk about like the Morlock annexation and single-family subdivision, one thing that the planning commission's hands were somewhat tied in that we specifically have subdivision regulations that say if there's a stub, you will interconnect. Those are in the regulations, and...
Well, there was one in Lockmere.
Yes, it is, but they're not putting in public streets like you would.
Oh, okay. I see.
And a great example would be is if the neighborhood wanted single family, for example, and they wanted to put a subdivision back there. If they're concerned about traffic, that's not in their best interest, because not only can they connect to those stuffs, they're required to.
That's my point, yeah.
Yep, so if they would develop that as a single-family subdivision, they'd be required to connect.
Wasn't there also a stub at John Hay for the second entrance that didn't happen?
Yes. And like I say, we supported it, but the general impression was that it was too steep and that they were going to have to grant variances to the slope, and the planning commission wasn't comfortable with the steepness of the slope.
Sounds
And there were a
to me
couple
like
others.
politics was played right there.
Of course, the politics were prevented from being played.
But the thing that we have that controls the interconnection is the plan review approval process. Staff makes a recommendation, planning commission makes the final decision, but we do have the subdivision reg. So if it mandates a interconnection between stubs, between single family, then they must do that. But when we're talking about best practices of planning, then I think that staff has an ability to convince the planning commission of what we're doing, and that's the process we have now.
And I've heard this group express an opinion since then that all subdivisions should have two exits, right?
Well, this
Yeah,
one
too
does.
bad that come
This
from-
one does.
Yeah.
That's come from staff, I think, more than this group.
Well,
Well, I heard this
public
group
safety,
express that opinion.
fire department.
Fire department, yeah.
I can understand that. And I don't think the people, I went down and spoke to the people last night, there's gonna be 2 of them, and the next thing I looked, and I'm surrounded by 11 of them, okay? Now, I didn't even have my gun.
They're probably glad of it.
They better be. But I made it out of there okay, but they've got some legitimate complaints. I mean, I can understand that. I think the best way to sell them, personally, Steve, and this is your profession, not mine, if they plan this thing and they go with single family, I think these people will be fine. If it goes R3, you won't have your hands full of this bunch. Well, it don't matter, as long as we make them do the berm.
They'll be required to put in a buffer. And my understanding is, they'll have someone here to speak at the meeting, and it'd be good for them to hear what expectations are.
Well, there's something else to consider here, I understand, and that is a sewer connection. If someone requests annexation and it's denied, and they can then petition to NUS to have sewer run, that can take place, right, Laura? But there's a considerable cost difference.
The agreement when we transferred sewer operations over to MUS with regards to extending sewer outside the city limits is that the property owner must request annexation to begin with. That brings them into the city. However, if they request and it's denied, MUS does have the right and authority to extend sewer outside the city limits in that situation. So if we were to deny this annexation, we could easily see the development happening under county regulations with MUS sewer.
With no city tax dollars.
Right.
No
The city would be providing sewer service without any return. The return goes to the county.
The price would be double for 1,000 gallons.
Sure, but we're providing service with no compensation.
But that's MUS collecting that, not the city.
It is,
But in years past, when we ran the sewer system, that was a real tool that was used.
no, I'm not.
Tommy, you had mentioned the last time we talked about this, something about maybe even a fence, and I think that's one of the real concerns that they have, not just shrubbery.
I think that we have one of the best planning departments in the state of Tennessee. I mean that from the bottom of my heart. But I have witnessed situations where influential people get their way.
In the planning department?
Well, I mean, it's there. It's a fact.
Well, how does that relate to my fence I mentioned? You
Your
mentioned-
fence, being your fence,
Not my
I mean,
fence, the fence you
if we're
mentioned.
gonna put a berm up, if we're gonna have something that's gonna break the subdivision versus the apartment complexes or whatever, we have to have something up. We're so vague in what we're saying that you have to have. What you and I both know of areas right now on the west end of town that the guy said, I will plant trees, and he says later, I'll plant trees about this tall, and in 30 years, they'll cover this whole thing.
Oh, so you're not knocking my comment?
No,
You're-
ma'am,
you're
I'm not
support-
knocking
okay,
your comment
okay.
at all. I'm just saying that we need to have an identification of what those berms are, and we need to stick with them.
Exactly.
Well,
Go
we
ahead,
had a
Steve.
situation,
I'm sorry.
and Steve, I brought this up to you, you got it handled, okay? We had a situation to where I feel like a member of your team passed the buck, okay? They gave them the opportunity to rent the place. Before the berm was, or the whatever fence or whatever that person chose to put up. Well, it has been put up, okay? The trees are
But we had
5,
to get
6
involved.
feet. Yeah, we did have
We
to
had
get
to get
involved. But the part that bothered me is she said, assured me on at least 5 occasions, they will not get a certificate of occupancy to rent these units until this is done. And then the last time I asked about it, you need to get a hold of codes enforcement because it's out of our hands.
But they were renting.
Oh, yeah, yes, they were.
Steve,
Yes, you're exactly right. The buffers were put up, and I went out and looked at it, and I'm not satisfied with it either. So we are, I was hoping to have it on the next month's agenda, but they won't be ready, but we are bringing back text amendments to the buffer regulations
that's correct. I'm glad to hear
to
that.
beef them up, because you're exactly right. In a few years, those will fill out, and so we're looking and we're working with Mike Cupp as to, what, if, certain species are thicker when they start, well, those may be separated a little bit, but if you're
That
gonna
buffer should be there today. The day that that's done, there should be a buffer, not a buffer in 20 years.
Are you saying we might need to specify what types of buffers, like fir trees and not red maples.
Yeah, but you
Fir
can't put a
trees
2-foot tree up
You gotta
and
go
say in
by.
20 years, it's gonna cover the whole thing.
Didn't we do something where we talked about the diameter of the tree trunk had to be such
Well, we
and
do
such?
a minimum on that. Kind of what the mayor was pointing out is, depending on the species, maybe we have a greater separation or a closer separate, bring them closer together so that they do provide an adequate, or maybe we require 2 staggered sets of trees that will provide an immediate buffer. I mean, there are lots of different things, and maybe we tie it to the height of the building. If it's a taller building, then the buffer would be even larger so that there's a greater separation between the adjacent property.
I'd like
There-
to see you look into that.
Well, one example that I think was successful was Massachusetts Springs behind Food City, where they planted those white pines, I guess. They were some type of pine tree, and that was 5 years ago, 4 years ago. You look at how they've grown, I mean, they're a pretty good buffer with country club stuff.
20 years
That's a
ago,
very good buffer.
20 years ago, white pines were a great buffer. People planted them, they were thick, they grew tall, but now their bottom branches are 6 feet off the ground and they're not quite as an effective barriers. So I like white pines for the instant.
I use that as
Buffer.
an example, because
Yeah,
that's what
but
Christmas
that's-
trees used to be. And those Christmas trees grow for 60 years,
Well, I just think we owe it to the people who are being affected not to say, okay, in 20 years, you're gonna have a real nice buffer out there, and we're talking to a 75, 80-year-old person.
They'll never live to see it.
They'll never live to see it happen.
It's
But
hard
we-
to get a buffer though, it's hard to get a tree big enough when,
Exactly.
when you're putting them out.
No, but if we said you had to have a 10-foot high tree that covers it, then they might decide they wanna build a fence.
Well, that's true.
Or they might decide they wanna burn up some dirt and plant trees up on that hill.
Well, before we get into all that, what do we want to do with this annexation thing?
I think it needs to be annexed.
I'm pro annexing stuff, but I think these people have some legitimate questions.
Okay,
And I
but
think
what
somebody
they want
in
to do is
here-
they want us to give them a legitimate answer, and the answer they want us to, I guess, to deny it, but that's the question. We vote to annex it, to take it into the city, but, and we're aware of it when it comes time for development and planning, we're gonna put some teeth in there.
Well,
That's gonna be
can
several
we
years or
put
two
any
away.
teeth, can we put any teeth in it tonight? No, we can't.
Can't do it tonight, but we can do
Well,
it.
all right, and then they're taking us at face value.
Is that worth any value?
Face value? Said worth what it's, whoever they're talking to.
Well, I mean, if you say,
Don't let it go for long.
what I'm saying is
Am
our
I gonna
word.
take, is my word to those people that's here tonight
Is it
any
good?
more than, not unless I've got 4 people or 3 more people that agree with me, it ain't no good.
You gotta have 5 more people tonight.
Well,
That's true.
what I'm saying is,
I don't
do
have
we
a
want,
problem.
do we feel confident that we can protect their concerns
We
even
must
with an
protect their
annexation vote
concerns.
tonight? That's what I'm asking.
We must protect our concerns, but we must
Grow.
take care of our city, which is what we're charged to do.
All right.
And that's, if we do not annex that, we're not doing what's right for the city.
I think
It's just that there's things that need to be done to protect those people in Britton Acres. And we need to make sure that happens.
Perfect.
And I think they need to know that
Right,
from this body that we're not gonna let that happen.
that's right.
If it goes in all single family, they don't care if it comes out on first claim. They have no problem with that.
Well, I don't think that that's giving them the authority to tell us what we can build in the city.
Well,
Not here
no, not
too.
according to planning, it's not, because if it's single family, you don't create all that traffic that you would for
Yeah, but we're
apartments.
telling it has to be single family.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying if it's gonna be R3, then it has to go out at the highway.
Exactly. Yes, I agree.
Now, we can't tell planning that tonight,
No.
because that's not how the rules are drawn up.
I think they heard.
I'm pretty sure Steve's not deaf, but, huh? But, I'm just saying, there needs to be other council members assure these people that if this happens, we're gonna hold planning speak to the fire in this deal. And they need to hear that tonight.
Steve,
You're
our
gonna
three
share
can,
that with them,
I don't have a problem with that.
I know you don't.
It doesn't bother me. Remember, I was one of 11, or excuse me, one of 12.
And you don't have your gun either, right?
I didn't say that. No.
I've got a couple of things here.
I've got my pants on.
I just want to say one more
Appreciate
thing. Our three can be all single-family houses, right?
Yes, it can.
Okay. So that's what Chris was saying earlier.
Yeah, I guess let's bring up shortly.
Sure.
I've been approached to ask this council to give award to Mr. Craig Price and his wife, permanent membership to the land.
Oh,
And last night I was at the Parks and Rec members and they went along with it because they had worked with him all that time.
like a retirement gift.
Well, appreciation of all the work he's done.
Since we can't give him his gun.
I think that's perfect.
Well, we're getting a little funky here. Let's see when we cross the hall.
No, wait a minute, I've got a couple of things I want to bring up.
Oh,
real quick.
goodness gracious.
Number one, Andrew, how are we doing on the bidding, the RFPs or whatever it is for the two pieces of property?
We have, tomorrow, we have optional site visits, and we've got people lined up at both of them, so we've got responses. We'll see how many actually show up tomorrow, and then,
Did we actually give them this can go in here and this cannot go in here?
so I might need some help from Steve, remind me on this, but on the request for proposals, we pretty much sought ideas. So really, somebody could, one proposal could be vastly different from the other. One person might come in and say, old fire station 4, I want to open up an ice cream stand. The next proposal might say, I want that because I'm buying the property next to it and the property on the other side, and I'm going to redevelop it as,
But I was saying, I want to put in a car lot, and we're saying you can't put in a car lot.
we were more specific on the Station 4 about uses that we did not want to see on that location.
And you're not obligated to accept any of the proposals.
Exactly.
And the location on East Main was a little bit more specific as far as like the style of design that we would like to see, something that would complement more of a downtown atmosphere.
I wanted to pass these around and give them to our horticulturists or whatever, but I just came from Pennsylvania last week and visited a 55-acre park. And the community, civic organizations, industries, garden clubs, and people like that had gone in and adopted areas. And you had a walking path like we're doing now with that walking trail, but people had adopted areas. And it was absolutely beautiful. Of course, it was the right time of the year to do that, but I wanted to pass those around and maybe give those to the horticulture. Give us some idea. Maybe, I'm not asking us to do anything now, but the future for Foothill Park has got to be, in my opinion, a passive park, but it's more than just going up and seeing some colonnades.
Yeah. Have you seen that trail we opened up?
Yes, I was up there yesterday.
I got pictures
of it if you want to see it. Yes.
I thought,
And I think that doing something, adopting some of these areas would be something we might be interested in.
We'll pass it along, and Mike always appreciates input and ideas, so we'll see what we can get done.
There's also been a request, and it would have to be evaluated like Tony's talking about here, for community gardens, and that takes a lot of guidelines, I know. I was just asking.
That's a lot of hands-on management.
Yes, yes.
this was all from one park.
Yes, that's all from one park. But there was like 5 or 6 places that you could have concerts in there, small concerts, acoustic concerts.
And like sitting areas.
Yes, exactly. I thought that could really fit, for long-term future, for our walking